Hello and welcome to a new video. I'm Vanguard and today we'll be going through the current state of AAA games in the video game industry as of right now. There's been huge discussion and controversy relating to the topic, and I'd like to dive into the subject. But without further ado, let's get right into it. First things first, what are AAA games? AAA games are known to be an informal classification used for video games produced and distributed by mid-sized to major publishers, typically having higher development and marketing budgets. It is basically the equivalent term of blockbusters to films in the video game industry. AAA game development is usually associated with high economic risk, with great levels of sales required to obtain profit, and is often amongst the year's bestsellers. The first signs of this term being used would be after the North American video game crash of 1983. Companies needed a term to differentiate their games from high to low budget developed games. Nintendo was one of the first to use this idea in an earlier form, through the use of a Nintendo seal of quality on their products, denoting that the game has been properly tested and approved. Alfred Milgram from Bean Software revealed how this affected attitudes towards creating these games. He said that the system promised zero defects and no bugs in games, a big difference to now. In the late 90s, companies created and began to use this term as a way to grade their games as being the highest standard. Fast forward to today, the term has become a common way for both developers and gamers to describe a particular title produced by a large publisher. Over the years, we have been introduced to a library of fantastic games. These would include the Super Mario Bros., Uncharted, The Witcher, Bioshock, Grand Theft Auto, Tomb Raider, The Legend of Zelda series, and so many more. What these franchises offered in their finest games were stories that challenged the audience, gameplay that was beyond its time for their new concepts or pure enjoyability, pleasing visuals, soundtracks, or the entire package. These series at one point or another presented innovation by making risks, or the highest level of refinements for the time. This was the goal of what every developer wanted and should still aim for. But as of lately, it seems that AAA games have been a pale comparison of what they used to be, a mere shadow of what they could potentially be. We can highlight the contrast of what games were and are now by comparing the critically acclaimed games according to Metacritic of 2010 and 2017. 2010 had Halo Reach, Battlefield Bad Company 2, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Red Dead Redemption, Super Mario Galaxy 2, God of War 3, Civilization 5, StarCraft 2, and Heavy Rain as their critically acclaimed titles, and 2017 merely had The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey. Of course, there are other games worth mentioning like Nier Automata and Horizon Zero Dawn, but this is really sad to see when compared. You could make the argument that the standards have been raised over time, so critically acclaimed games are rarer, but the quality overall for AAA has definitely lowered. The industry has been lacking on both quality and innovation. Games like Street Fighter V lack so many important content such as story, versus AI option, challenge mode, and etc. when it was first released. And then there's the Order 1886, where strong criticism was made towards the playtime, story, and gameplay. So many more suffered from similar issues, but what do all of these titles have in common for the most part? These games have gorgeous visuals which increases marketability. However, what are visuals when you have a game that is unrefined, incomplete, potentially broken, and lacks everything else? Nothing. But why is this happening in the first place? I believe that the goal in developing a game has slowly but surely changed in meaning, which has caused this downward trend. It was once like what I said, shooting towards the best quality and new ideas. You would think this would be more of a core aspiration for developers, as this is probably one of the most competitive eras in the video game industry. That unfortunately is not the case. So many companies are competing against each other. Taking risks or offering a greater service are key methods for succeeding and surpassing others in a business. However, huge organizations like EA and Ubisoft aren't taking these routes for some reason. The biggest reasons for this unfortunate turn of events would probably be due to the fact that developers' goal now is to maximize profits with lower effort, time, and costs. AAA games are produced with huge budgets, which already in itself is a large risk. They have to make quite a substantial amount of money to make profit. And new creative directions in a title may lead to smaller target audience, meaning less sales. The Call of Duty series is a prime example of this, with little to no changes made over the years. They've become romantic with how they initially made money, so they exploit this option. And it works because the consumers still purchase their games on a massive level. Investments are now directed towards marketing the game rather than enhancing it. Bad ports, broken games, and delays are slowly becoming uncomfortably common. The technical side of things has become so much more complicated than what it used to be. Even with a large budget backing up projects, we are still running into these obstacles. These rush games that are set to meet a certain deadline are big problems. Updates and patches weren't always a thing in the early days of gaming, and it's unacceptable that companies are getting away with it today. Essentially, you are paying for a game that's still in development. Final Fantasy 15 is a strong instance of this. Many would have said that there were a lot of missing content upon release, and Square Enix to this day, a year later, are still adding crucial plot elements. At least 50% of it should have been in the original base game in my opinion, not through DLC and additional cutscenes that were added months later. However, from a business perspective, releasing these incomplete games saves them time and money when it comes to testing their games, as many players voice their concerns. Furthermore, adding consistent updates after the game is released keeps it relevant for a longer lifespan. But there are games out there that do this well and actually add to the base title, rather than filling its gap that shouldn't have been there in the first place. Finally, the next major problem we have is microtransactions in video games. Now this is especially highlighted in Star Wars Battlefront 2, a huge controversy of 2017. EA offered for those who paid extra cash an unfair advantage to others that didn't, in the form of loot boxes. And it was almost impossible to gain these items that you rightfully have access to without pouring a frustrating amount of time into the game. It was calculated before the release to get one hero would take 40 hours of grinding. This is a true example of a greedy company doing all the means possible to gain money, sacrificing a player's freedom. The problems of AAA game relate to the lack of quality and innovation, releases with broken games and unfair microtransactions. This would be due to the changes in objective when creating games. Instead of enhancing the gameplay and story experience, companies like EA invest in the marketing of their games and profiting. The solution could be not to purchase low-quality games as consumers, focus less on graphics, marketability, and more on gameplay as developers, and to decrease the budget of games to lower the risk of failure, also putting less pressure on the teams making the game. That is what I think, and I know it's unrealistic in the harsh reality we live in, because the companies now just want to make the most that they can. But we can at least voice our thoughts by not buying the poorly made games. Hopefully developers can listen and find a solution to some or even all of these problems, though not all AAA game developers are affected. There are still incredible titles out there like Breath of the Wild and Uncharted. And I believe that indie games now truly have the opportunity to shine as competitors, providing what AAA games are missing in this day and age, with far inferior budget. It's a shame that storytelling of many popular games is dull when looking at the hidden gems from the indie genre, such as Finding Paradise. Well, that about wraps up this video. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. Thank you all for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.